that you're watching CAN TV. We're here today with Amy Campanelli, Cook County Public Defender since 1987 and head of the office since 2015. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Emma. Glad to be here.
So your office and a host of other organizations, including Black Lives Matter Chicago, Let Us Breathe Collective, Good Kids Mad City, U Medics, and Stop Chicago, have brought a suit against the city of Chicago for denying people in police custody access to counsel and phone calls following the protests that took place after George Floyd's killing. So can you just give us some details about the suit?
Well, the suit, it seemed like it was the right time to file a suit. We've actually been working on this lawsuit before the protests occurred. I've been working with different organizations like the University of Chicago and other civil rights law firms talking about issues that I have seen in my office for decades. That actually about 2 years ago, I filed a bill down in Springfield to change the law, actually more to clarify the law, which has existed since 1963, that police, when they arrest someone, all police, all law enforcement in Illinois must abide by this statute. And basically it says when you arrest someone, you have to treat them with dignity and respect. You have to treat them humanely, which means you have to provide for their medical care. You have to allow them to have phone calls within a reasonable time of the arrest. You have to allow them to communicate with an attorney. You have to allow them to consult with an attorney in private, call their family members. So this has been the law, Emma, since 1963. And what I have seen over my career, as you said, which started in 1987, that specifically Chicago police have not followed the law. I've had so many clients over the decades tell me that they never got a phone call. Right? And this is putting clients in isolation. This is keeping clients away from their family members so they can't get a lawyer, right? So they can't have their family member get them a lawyer to come to the police station. These are years and years and years of abuse of the law by the Chicago police. And I don't have to tell you and anyone else who's probably watching this that we have spent almost $1 billion since 2004 on police misconduct, Chicago police misconduct. And that includes all the John Burge cases, but all the other types of misconduct. The misconduct that sort of gets lost in the bigger, the Black Lives Matter movement. Of course, it's very, it's just horrible, of course, when an unarmed Black man is killed by the police, right? But there's a lot of other misconduct that has been occurring for decades here in Chicago. And basically it's the not having the right to arrest someone, not having probable cause, going into people's homes without arrest or search warrants, right? Breaking down doors, searching people without any type of reasonable suspicion that they had committed a crime. And then after arresting them, not giving them medical attention, not allowing them to use the bathroom. I had many clients tell me that they had to urinate in the interrogation room many times. Handcuffs too tight, where you would see the markings on their wrists, you know, freezing interrogation rooms, anything to get someone to confess, right? Treating them inhumanely and with disrespect, which is a violation of the law. So this little piece of the law that tells the police that you have to give people phone calls within a reasonable time of arrest, it sounds simple, doesn't it? It sounds like, oh my God, of course. I'm arrested. I should be able to call my family, tell them where I am, and I should be able to contact a lawyer. But they don't do that. And they haven't done it for decades. And they violated the law and they've never been held accountable. So 2 years ago, I had a bill pending. That bill is getting revamped this year with a bigger part of a bigger bill. And like I said, we were working on these issues before George Floyd was killed. So it just brought it to light. It gave it sunlight on these issues that the protesters saw. They were arrested. They didn't get any phone calls. They weren't allowed to contact their lawyers. And when we went to the police station, my lawyers and other lawyers from the National Lawyers Guild and other civil rights lawyers went to represent people at police stations. They weren't allowed in. They weren't allowed in. Okay? And just so you know, it's a class 3 felony. It's called official misconduct for any police officer who violates this law. Do you think any police officer has ever been held accountable and charged with a class 3 felony for not giving someone a phone call? No, they haven't. Do you think any Chicago police officer has been charged with official misconduct for hiding someone away and not letting them see their lawyer? Never happened. But it needs to happen. It needs to happen. It needs to happen now because we're done. We're done with this behavior, and we're done with law enforcement thinking they're above the law.
Well, one thing that you bring up in this suit as well is the de facto CPD black site Home and Square, where individuals are held for days without being able to be located by or have contact with family members or legal counsel. So how are they able to run operations like this with impunity?
That's a good question. They're able to do it because of, one, the code of silence. Other officers help each other and they lie about what they're doing, right? If there's no police report ever written, and a lot of the people that have been taken to Home and Square aren't charged, right? They're let go. So we don't see them. Over the years, there have been people who've been held incognito, not only in Home and Square, but other places, all the police stations in Chicago. And if they're not charged with a crime, they go home. Now they might file a complaint, right, with COPA, or in the old days, it was called IPRA. And we know what happened with those complaints, right? They fell on deaf ears. Nobody was held accountable. I come to you, the Police Accountability Agency, and I say that I was just held at Home and Square for 3 days. And yes, they let me go and they didn't charge me with a crime, but I wasn't allowed a phone call. They didn't allow me to call my family. Nobody knew where I was. And then what happened to those complaints? The officer says, oh no, that isn't what happened, or write a false police report, and there's a credibility issue. And many of those complaints were not founded. It's not that people didn't complain, right? It was just that it was always taking the side of the police, and other officers would come forward. And, you know, you look at the history. I mean, we don't just look at Laquan McDonald and all those false police reports that said the exact opposite of what we saw on the body worn cameras and on the dash cameras, right? And they thought, oh, that's so horrible. And every time I see something like that, I'm like, oh my God, there's thousands of cases like that. You know, not Laquan McDonald, but there's thousands of cases where false police reports are written, and then officers testify in court under oath that their false police report is the truth. And what happens is when we investigate, what public defenders do, when we get a case, we investigate those police reports. And we show that the police report is false because we find a witness who says that I never said that to the police. No, I didn't identify your client. Or we attack the forensic evidence and we win those cases. Right. We win in court and that client is exonerated. But it doesn't bring systemic change. A case by case, winning this case in front of a jury, winning this case at a bench trial, getting the evidence thrown out in front of a judge because the police violated the law. Sure, that client, that case that client is exonerated, that client is out of the system, but it doesn't bring that systemic change. It doesn't tell the public, look what's happening. You know, it doesn't make the police accountable. You see what I'm saying? The police are never held accountable just because they lose a case in court. What we have to do, right, is make sure they're held accountable by being disciplined, whether that's suspended or firing or worse. And we have to take away immunity, right? We have to take away that qualified immunity. If we start making police officers have to dip into their own pocket for malpractice, for malfeasance, then maybe they'll stop the behavior. Maybe they'll stop lying in police reports. Maybe they'll stop covering up for other officers that they know aren't telling the truth because they were on the scene with them and they saw what happened. But the sergeant signed his name to this report, even though the sergeant knew it wasn't true. And you see someone being held in custody without being given a phone call. Right. Other officers have allowed that to happen for decades. They know what the law is. I told you, the law has been the law since 1963. Before Miranda versus Arizona. I'm not talking about Miranda, where you have to read someone their rights and you have a right to remain silent. You have a right to have a lawyer. If you can't afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you. If you talk to us, your words will be held against you. That's Miranda versus Arizona. That became the law in 1965 or 66, well after people in Illinois thought it was important that just because you're arrested doesn't mean you can violate someone's rights. You have to treat people with dignity and respect. And one last thing I want to say, because this has to be said. If people are treated with dignity and respect when they are arrested, that brings trust to the police department. I have been talking to law enforcement over the last 4 years, 5 years since I've been the public defender. I've been trying to tell them, If you start following the law and giving people access to phones within an hour of their arrest, right? It doesn't say one phone call either. Reasonable number of phone calls within a reasonable time of arrest. That doesn't mean 2 days later when you decide to charge me. That doesn't mean after you interrogate me. And there's an administrative code that says reasonable time is within an hour, right? You've got to put yourselves in the shoes of someone who's arrested, guilty or innocent. It doesn't matter. You have to treat everyone the same. And then the police will be trusted. Because let's say I'm someone and I committed the burglary, right? I commit a burglary and the police arrest me. And I should be arrested. I committed a crime and I'm brought to the police station. But I'm not allowed to use a phone call. I have a medical condition. They don't care about it. Maybe I have an injury that they don't fix. They don't take me to the hospital. They leave me in a room isolated. I bang on the door. They don't let me out to use the bathroom. That will remain with me forever. And when you heard the protesters talk, we had a press conference before we filed this lawsuit. And I was listening to the people who got up to the microphone after me, some of the people who've been arrested. They're having nightmares. They will never forget how they were treated by the police. And they will tell others how they were treated by the police. And those others will tell others. That's why the community does not trust the police. Because when police behave badly, it spreads. And I always say, if you are treated well by the police, you do better. Like if I committed a burglary and I should be arrested, you treat me well in the police station, let me make my phone calls, don't hide me away, let my lawyer in to talk to me, and then public defenders, lawyers who go to the police stations, we're there to tell you, okay, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go to bond court tomorrow. I'm going to call your family and tell them where you are. And the system gains trust. The whole system benefits, right? All of us in the court system don't look like we're out to treat people unfairly. Mm-hmm. If the judge is fair, if the prosecutor is fair, if you have a good defense attorney, and if the police don't mistreat you, the system is working.
Right. And so talk a little bit more about qualified immunity, because that has become so much, it's so much a part of the national conversation now.
Well, right now, under I haven't read the entire fraternal or police contract, but I know in many contracts with police, the government agency, the city here in Chicago, it's the city that is over the Chicago police. If the police misbehave or commit misconduct or violate the law, they don't have to reach into their personal pocket, to pay any money. They don't have to pay for their own lawyer. They don't have to pay, let's say the city, they go to trial and a jury finds that this police officer was corrupt, took money from drug dealers, did all sorts of things that we've seen in the news here in Chicago for decades, tortured people or entered into a home, without a search warrant, and then, broke apart everything in the home. The police don't have to pay for that. They don't have to fix that person's house. Nothing comes out of their own pocket. The city has to pay those settlements. And I just told you it's almost $1 billion since 2004 if you include the attorney's fees. All the money that's gone to pay the attorneys to defend the police. So it's about almost $700 million for the police misconduct, which includes all sorts of misconduct, and then almost $300 million in attorney's fees, just since 2004, for settlements against the Chicago police for their misconduct. Now, as a lawyer, not all settlements mean you were guilty of the misconduct. Sometimes people settle out of court for a lot of reasons. But $1 billion and all the testimony that we've heard in the courtrooms and all the transcripts we've seen, what has gone on in federal court and state court with Chicago police. I mean, people have testified under oath about the code of silence, right? People have testified under oath about the corruption in the Chicago Police Department. People have testified under oath about these violations the Chicago police have committed, and citizens have been hurt, and people have been, abused, and the law just hasn't been upheld. And all the complaints, my clients over the years have come to me and told me what the police have done to them. I've seen injuries, black eyes, like I said, wrists, bruises on their chest, other non-physical injuries like lying to them, keeping them in cold interrogation rooms for 2 days, isolated, like I said, those kind of things, not giving them food, those kind of things. So we've seen those kind of bad behaviors on the part of Chicago police for years. And we have filed complaints, and clients do file complaints against the agency that's supposed to help them. But those agencies have failed them. So why file a complaint? Why do it? We need civilian oversight of the Chicago police. We need less qualified immunity, so the police would have to dip into their pocket for willful violations. Now, I think the law has to be written very carefully about when they can get immunity and when they can't. It should be willful, right? It should be, almost like a crime, intentional. I intentionally went into that house when I knew I shouldn't have, right? I know the law, but I just didn't follow the law. That's intentional. And those police should be held to a higher standard, and they should have to pay money out of their pocket.
Right.
I think that will curtail some of the behavior. We could try it and see.
In the suit, you detail the way in which COVID-19 exacerbated the situation because in-person legal visits from the public defender's office were ceased because of health and safety concerns. However, CPD then refused to provide detainees with secure and private locations to speak with counsel telephonically. So did the COVID crisis create a legal loophole for CPD, or by not providing people with private rooms to contact counsel, were they violating the law?
They're definitely violating the law. There was no legal loophole for the CPD. The law has been since 1963 that upon arrest, you have a right to communicate with counsel and consult with counsel. That's two different things. There's two different statutes. Communication is, let me call my lawyer, right? Let me talk to my lawyer on the phone, get him to come down here and represent me. In COVID, get him to talk to me on the phone in private. So the consultation with the lawyer must be confidential. It must be in private. That's always been the law. So, it's so exacerbating when I'm trying to work with the Chicago Police Department, tell them what the law is, educate them about how the law helps them. If they would follow the law, they would have a lot more trust in the community. They could solve more crimes. People would have faith in the entire court system, because remember, it's the crime, the alleged crime, then the police are the first responders, then they get into the court system. So the whole court system is affected by what the police do on the street and what the police do in the privacy of their police stations. So there's never been a loophole. And when you look at what happened to George Floyd, and you look at that police officer's face and how he was sitting there with his knee on his neck and just staring at the camera. He knew he was looking into the phone. He knew he was being video recorded. You have to imagine what they do when they're not being video recorded. You have to imagine it is so much worse. And those of us who have been doing this work for decades, we know how much worse it's been for decades. And the problem is, if you get away with it and you're allowed in your police station to do whatever you want, and nobody is watching you and nobody's holding you accountable for the law, you continue to do it. And then you get sued civilly by a client who was hurt, and they got a wrongful conviction or a wrongful confession or whatever, and you're sued, and then you don't even have to pay for it. You get a free lawyer. The city pays your settlement fee. What's the incentive to follow the law? There's no incentive. And then the training. You would think that police officers who want to be police officers want to follow the law. That's their job. Serve and protect, right? But follow the law. They have to know the law in order to follow it, but they're here to serve and protect us. And service is a huge part of it. Yes, law and order is part of it, right? We want to protect our citizens. When a crime is committed, people have to be held accountable. I'm not saying that anybody who commits a crime shouldn't be held accountable. They absolutely should be, but they have to be treated fairly. And that doesn't mean locked away for hours on end in a police station where they have no control. And this is what the public and people who've never been arrested don't understand. If you've never been arrested and put into a room in a police station, you have no control at all over anything. You don't have control over when you go to the bathroom. You don't have control whether you're going to eat or not. You don't have control whether you have your diabetic medication on your person or they took it. They're going to take your cell phone so you can't call anyone. You wait and wait and wait till even someone talks to you and tells you why you're there. What are you being charged with? Are you going to be able to go home? Can I call my family? I have kids in daycare I can't pick up, right? So you have no control at all. The police have all the control. And that's scary, right? That's where the problems happen, because the police know they have all the control and they have all the power and they abuse the power. And the problem with the Chicago police and why we sued them is because they've been abusing their power.
And so you note in the lawsuit, so this is a quote, so between April 16th, 2020 and June 5th, 2020, the public defender surveyed 1,468 people in bond court. Of the 1,468 people surveyed, 338, so 23%, stated that CPD never offered them access to a phone at any point while they were detained at the police station. So you did a similar study addressing the failure of CPD to provide detainees with the number for an attorney while in custody. And that percentage was even lower, so at 13%. And those numbers are egregious. So do you think that that is situational, or would you expect to see similar numbers under normal circumstances?
Oh, I would expect to see similar numbers under normal circumstances. This is the situation with the phone numbers, though. I have to say this about the phone numbers. The law does not say at this time that the police have to post phone numbers of lawyers. That's in my bill, the bill that I presented 2 years ago and the bill that hopefully is going to come up in Springfield in the fall. That if there's an agency like myself, the Law Office of the Cook County Public Defender, doing the work of going to police stations upon getting a phone call that they want representation, that you have to put my phone number, right, next to this notice of rights that must be posted in the police station. So that's part of my bill. That's not the law. They don't have to give a phone number of a lawyer. What they have to do is allow the person to use a phone to call a lawyer or call their mother or father and say, hey, can you call the public defender's office? I don't have the number. Can you get me a lawyer? I just got arrested. I'm here at the 5th district or 6th district or 8th district in Chicago. Please get the lawyer to come and see me. And, they don't have to post the number of lawyers. Now, but Chicago police agreed to post my number. When we had an interim superintendent, I believe her name was Ann Fitzgerald or Fitzpatrick. I always forget her name. She was the interim after Superintendent McCarthy and before Superintendent Johnson. We had the interim superintendent, and I worked with her. And this is the time when we were working on the Police Accountability Task Force in about 2016. So we worked with that interim superintendent who looked at the law and saw that what was supposed to be posted in every room where someone is held in custody. Now, this is a state law. Every room where someone is held in custody, a notice of these rights has to be posted in large conspicuous writing on the wall, right? So you can read it. Those posters were never up in police stations. I mean, we went around to police stations and we worked with Ann Fitzpatrick, the superintendent at that time, saying, we got to get these posters up. And oh, by the way, will you also post the phone number of my office? Because we're now, after the chief judge allowed us and wrote the court order, we now go to police stations. We have a new unit. If 24/7, if someone calls my office, we will go to a police station and represent people free of charge, no matter who you are. Rich, poor, it doesn't matter. The Judge Evans is appointing me upon the phone call. You understand what I'm saying? That was never the law before. So I worked with her, and when we worked on the Police Accountability Task Force, when Lori Lightfoot, before she was mayor, was part of the task force, and we got the posters to be put up. We worked with CPD on the language of the poster, which comes right out of the law. There's no language that we had to fiddle with about what the poster has to say. It's just that the poster has to be put up. And then they agreed, she agreed, and let's put your phone number up too. But what we found when my lawyers go to police stations, they sometimes see that the posters aren't up still, they've been taken down, I went myself to 51st and Wentworth, and I don't remember who I talked to, but I talked to one of the detectives. I don't think it was the commander. And he took me upstairs to the second floor where they have several interrogation rooms. And the poster was on the outside of the door. The client is in the inside of the room. And I said to the detective, I said, this won't work. This doesn't comply with the law. The poster has to be inside the room so the client can read and say, oh, I have a right to medical attention. Oh, I understand the police have to treat me fairly and humanely. Oh, I have a right to have a reasonable number of phone calls. I'm going to ask for my phone call. Oh, I have a right to a lawyer. I'm going to ask for a lawyer. This is not Miranda, right? This is the people of Illinois back in the 60s thought it was important that people be treated fairly by law enforcement because they understood the power. They understood the control that police have, right? And instead, the poster was on the outside of the door. I said, got to be on the inside of the door. Oh, well, they'll rip it down. Really? You have a poster behind plexiglass with 4 steel, bolts. Nobody's getting that poster out. Don't tell me that, but that's the pushback. That's what we've been seeing. Even we're trying to help them comply with the law, they still push back. They push back every time. You know, when I went and testified on my bill a year and a half ago, I went to Springfield and I testified in front of the Senate committee. And I told the 20 legislators who were there, and a commander from the Chicago Police Department was sitting next to me. And I said to them, I said, we're clarifying this bill. I said, do you really think $700 million isn't a slap in the face that they don't want to follow the law, right? Just make them follow the law. Follow this bill. It's 3 phone calls within an hour of arrest. 3 phone calls within an hour. You would have thought I asked for the firstborn child of that commander. Because you know what he said? He said, we never violate people's rights. We always give them phone calls. Are you kidding me? We would never. And then he said, Miss Campanelli's trying to charge me with a crime. You know, I didn't respond, but I wanted to respond and say, has anyone ever been charged with a class 3 felony for official misconduct for not putting the posters up and for not following what the statute says on those posters and for not giving phone calls and not giving medical attention? No, no prosecutor has ever charged any Chicago police officer with a class 3 felony. But if they did, maybe someone would do their job if they did, if they had the threat of going into their own pocket for the money, and if they had the threat of criminal charges. That's why he didn't want the change in the bill. He was worried that he was going to be charged with a crime. They should be charged with a crime. They should have been charged with crimes all this time for not putting the posters up is a crime. It's a class 3 felony, just not putting the poster up. Okay? So it's exacerbating. I cannot tell you. It just makes such common sense to me. But they want all the control.
Yeah.
Right? They want to do things the way they want to do them, like they've always done them.
To close, I mean, what has the response of the city been to the suit so far? And what do you see as what's to come?
I don't know. I mean, we'll see how that plays out in court, right? I'm one of the plaintiffs. We'll see. I just saw what was quoted in the Daily Law Bulletin and in the newspapers that basically we're complying, and even in our lawsuit, we admit that they're complying. No, they comply sometimes. That's not the law. The law is every single person you arrest must be treated with dignity and respect, no matter what you have arrested them on. I don't care if it is the worst crime you can think of or a criminal trespass to land. Everybody must be treated fairly and with dignity. They get the phone calls. The poster better be in the room where they're sitting, wherever that is in your police station. They get water. They get food. They get medical attention. And if their family comes, they get to see the family. And if the lawyer shows up, you better let that lawyer in immediately. Not when you feel like it. Not 10 hours later, which you know that that's what they did during the protests. And their excuse is, oh, we couldn't get to everyone. I'm sorry, there's no loophole for not getting to everyone. The lawyers get to get in. And when lawyers are in the room, they stop the abuse. When lawyers are in the room, they protect people's rights. And I keep saying to all of us, anyone who will hear me, the entire world, unless you've been arrested, just think about anyone you know who's ever been arrested. Wouldn't you want them treated fairly? Wouldn't you want them to at least have the ability to use a phone, to call a loved one, to make sure the loved one knows where they are, and if a lawyer shows up, to call that lawyer and make sure the lawyer gets in the room? Because two wrongs don't make a right, right, Emma? Because the worse the crime is, what we have seen, let's say someone is arrested on a horrible murder or a triple murder or, a crime against a child. That doesn't give the police the right to violate your rights, because two wrongs don't make a right, right? You have to continue on the path, follow the law. The police are held up here. I'm sorry. I hold my lawyers to a high standard. The police are held to the highest standard. If the police break the law, what law do we have? If the police break the law, there is no law. And they've been breaking the law for 50 years. And it's time to stop and hold them accountable. And if I could just get them to understand how much trust this will bring. I'm not telling you not to investigate your case. I'm not telling you not to do your job. I'm telling you that lawyers will help you do your job. Lawyers will protect you, quite frankly, from lawsuits. I'll stop you from mistreating my clients, so then you won't be sued in the future.
Yeah.